Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. We have Aaron Mader, a.k.a. Lazerbeak. If you don't know who he is at this point, you've been living under a rock, probably. But Lazerbeak has been one of the most prominent producers in the hip-hop scene here, part of the Doomtree collective over the last, 10, 15
billion years. Yeah.
Exactly. A long time. He's done collaborations with all kinds of artists, including lots of different genres. I'll read his bio here in a second to get to some of those highlights. But what I'm excited to dig into with today's episode is, well, for one, I think diving into specifically some of the rap and hip hop scene, because we haven't covered that a lot on this podcast yet.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And then two, just because of your longevity in the scene, talking about how the scene's changed, where it's at now versus where it was, how the music industry in general has changed, what a life looks like as a professional artist, producer at 42 years old.
Old man.
Those are things that are hard to get off of anybody else. A lot of times all we see is what is super, super successful and what is not successful at all. And this is the middle ground. And I think we're just going to learn so much. I know I'm going to learn a lot. I'm excited to speak with you today. Let me read your bio here and we'll get into it.
Perfect.
Aaron Mader, known professionally as Lazerbeak, is a Minneapolis-based artist and producer. Aside from being a founding member of the Doomtree collective, he's also the CEO and general manager of Doomtree Records, handling the day-to-day operations, management, and inner workings of the crew and label. Over the past decade, he has collaborated with everyone from reigning pop queen Lizzo, producing her entire debut album, bluegrass heavyweights Trampled by Turtles, mythological indie supergroup Gangs, and the Grammy-winning Minnesota Orchestra, all while continuing to build and create with lifelong comrades from his own Doomtree Artist Collective and notching production credits on everything from Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton mixtape to the dark electro-pop of Banks's critically acclaimed 3 album. Please welcome Aaron Mader.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much.
Some really impressive credits.
Thank you. Well, being 42, you can kind of you can notch them after a while, 30 years doing this or whatever.
It takes time.
Yeah, for sure.
This is our first time meeting.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions just out of my own curiosity. And I'm digging around through your background before the interview, all that kind of stuff, reading stuff. And boy, you've done a lot of different projects, a lot of different styles. You've got your solo stuff, you've got collabs, you've got these random credits, which I'm not even sure what role those are in some places.
Totally.
You're running Doomtree. Man, there's a lot there. Because we have so much to cover, I do want to start at the beginning, but feel free to stick to the things that you find to be the most sort of important to a young artist to learn from.
Sure.
But take us back to the beginning. Where did it begin?
Yeah, with music, God, I'm having this crazy time right now because my kids are actually starting to play their first instruments in school. They just, my twin boys just started 5th grade. And so it's signing up for band instruments and all that. But it all started for me with an alto saxophone in 4th grade. I went to a public school that was lucky enough to have a music department. And Lisa Simpson was probably the coolest thing I could think of at the time. So alto sax had a decline, I think, around that time. Trumpet seemed a lot cooler, but I stuck with alto sax. And then come 7th grade, there was redistricting and I started a new school. I didn't know anybody and I kind of fell in with these indie rock slacker dudes. And they all had guitars already. They had already started their DIY bands and were making little demo tapes with 4 tracks and stuff. And
wow, it's 7th grade.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it was so cool and inspiring. And I was like an R&B kid, so I had never even listened to much rock, but I was just like suddenly kind of absorbing all this new music. And I found my dad's acoustic guitar in the closet. He was a youth pastor, and so he was kumbayaing, and doing all the church songs and things like that, and pulled it out, and just a kid, like, figured out how to play a couple notes, but immediately like wrote a song, like a 3-note song on the E string or whatever. Horrific, but the start.
Yeah.
And then by that summer, I had learned enough as far as like octaves and power chords, like anybody else, to, of course, start a band with your best friend. And that band was the Plastic Constellations. That's kind of my first start in music. And we cut our teeth at school dances and birthday parties and anything we could get our hands on. But by high school, we were running our own record label, essentially. We had started a label called Pretentious Records. We were able to do that through a program at my high school called Independent Study, where if you could convince a teacher to kind of like be your boss for that semester, and you could convince them about what you were trying to do, they would sign on. And instead of taking study hall, you'd actually get a credit for some sort of creative endeavor. So it's like, well, we're going to start a record label, and we're going to press up a 7-inch, and we're going to make a little catalog for our label and start mail order and all that. And so just like was so fascinated, I think, by the DIY work ethic of, for me, coming up, it was the indie rock scene of like Matador Records and Merge Records, and the scene in Chicago, just like seeing regular old people making it happen and going to Kinko's and photocopying lyric sheets and just like hand doing everything. So anyways, then the band, like, we started to get some shows in the cities. I remember there weren't many all ages venues, but a place called the Foxfire Coffee Lounge opened up downtown, kind of across the street from where the Fine Line is now. And it only existed for a little over a year. But in that time, I like tried to go to as many shows as I could. I figured out who the booker and the owner was, and I like wrote him a letter and, and included the 7-inch of our band and just said, if you ever need anybody for free to open up or someone cancels, like, we'd love to play. And that led to like a Sunday night label showcase with 3 of our friends' bands from Hopkins High School. And we were able to get like 70 kids from Hopkins to come to the show downtown. The booker of the venue saw that and was like, oh, these kids can actually draw a little bit. And then started having us open up for bands, and slowly kind of just kept at it. Yeah. And that led to opening up for other bands. So it's just that constant, like, one thing leads to another. And then we were fortunate enough to sign to, we got a really good Pitchfork review back in the early days of Pitchfork. We signed to French Kiss Records, which was a big label indie label out of New York, and like hit the road. And really the first half of my 20s, our first tour was, I think, 11th grade, summer break. And God bless my parents. They let us borrow their Toyota Previa minivan, and we took it out east and did 2 weeks and, playing in basements and coffee shops and all that. And I had the itch from a very early beginnings. And it wasn't just for, certainly I wanted to like headline Lollapalooza like any other kid that picks up a guitar, but I was so curious about all the inner workings. How do you get a show booked? How do you book a tour? How do you meet other bands? How do you trade shows in other cities? How do you press up a 7-inch or even consign a demo tape at the local record shop? And then it was CDs, and then it went back to records, and then, who makes t-shirts? How do you make a t-shirt? All that stuff, my young brain was just like on fire for. And at the same time, I'm getting inspired by all the other things I'm seeing, or the labels I'm hearing about, or the artists that are happening. And there's obviously a huge independent hip hop scene that's been in Minneapolis for a really long time, Twin Cities. And Rhymesayers was at the head of that when I was coming up in junior high and high school, and, getting the first releases from them, and realizing that as I was kind of falling in love, or back in love with rap music, I was seeing that you could do it a million different ways for the first time. It wasn't just what I saw on MTV or on the radio, heard on the radio. It was like, oh, this is rap music that operates in the same kind of DIY ethos as the indie rock that I came up on. Yeah. And that was a real moment for me to realize, like, regardless of genre, this is still back in the 90s when genre is a lot more kind of compartmentalized, right?
Yeah, definitive of like how people even identified themselves.
For sure.
Which has really changed.
I think I am of the generation that it was 2 things, right? It was like the last one that I grew up without internet, and then I got like a Hotmail email, password, whatever thing in high school. But like the first chunk of my life, no internet. And then also I'm one of the last generations, I think that you were really defined by the type of music you listened to.
Yes.
When I was coming up, you were like, well, I was an indie rock kid. And it was weird then to be like, but now I'm a rap kid, or, there wasn't like, it wasn't as common to just say like, I listen to everything or check out my Spotify playlist.
Yeah, that was not normal.
So I'm dating myself here, but I have loved so much. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the things I haven't loved about the change in the music industry since I was a kid. But one of the things I absolutely adore is that a lot of those walls have come down, and the idea that you can be pigeonholed into one style of music is outrageous. And I'm so happy that everyone's just like, they like what they like, and it's changing all the time, and that's phenomenal. I'm rambling, but
no, I love this because I'm 4 years behind you.
Okay.
So I'm not far off.
Yeah.
And my experiences are so similar, And I think back to the early days of like starting a band when you could play just a few notes on a fret, and it's like, okay, this is good enough.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Totally. We'll figure it out. That's been my whole life is kind of that motto is like, we'll figure it out. And we grew up in a place where there hadn't been a ton of infrastructure as far as like a big city that would have record labels or A&R people or even booking agents or things like that. So much of it truly has just been a journey of like, I guess we'll have to figure it out, or we'll have to actually talk to other people who are trying to figure out, which forced me out of my shell and got me a lot more comfortable with just like asking questions and going and supporting other people and making peers out of those people and combining resources and figuring out, Doomtree is birthed out of 3 or 4 rappers who each only had like 2 or 3 songs, and none of them could get their own set because they didn't have enough material. But if we put, Cecil and Steph on a set together, then we can come up with 20 minutes, and then, there's more of us, so we all have more friends together, so we can get more people to come out, convince the bartenders to pay us out at the end of the night. So it's all kind of just out of necessity of kind of using the lack of resources to our benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been my kind of life's work, is just like figuring it out, failing, trying again, figuring something out, losing it, to having to figure out a different way. Like that's just kind of how it's gone. And I don't see it changing anytime soon.
So what happens after Plastic Constellations? Like, how does that come to its end?
So that band went the way of a lot of bands people in their 20s. We gave it a really good run. We kind of plateaued at some point, had big ambitions of like, once we signed to the New York label, then the next release was going to take us over the top. But we kind of plateaued with the amount of people that were coming to see us in North America and the interest. And then also that was met with like, at the same time, very real world life issues that like, we all have to pay rent. Some of us are going to college. Some of us are getting married. Some are thinking about careers or potentially children at some point. And so slowly the priority stopped being the band because it kind of had to. We weren't big enough to make it the priority.
Yeah.
So a beautiful friendship that has lasted through the years still. Like I'm going to see Jeff, the other guitarist in the band, tomorrow night, going over for a barbecue. But the music kind of slowed down. We called it quits in the mid 2000s. And at that time, for 3 or 4 years, I had been starting to make beats and also pursuing hip hop production mostly. POS from Doomtree actually, out of high school, we would drive around all the time listening to rap music, and he bought a used MPC, just like a old school beat machine, sampler, and started rapping and was like, dude, we were in rival bands coming up in high school. Like he was in a pop punk band, I was in the indie rock band, and we were always friends, but we were kind of vying for the same slots. And
sure.
He was like, you know how to write songs? Like, you'll figure it out. At this point, especially, I was so enamored with hip hop, and I was going back and learning all the history and just kind of like getting my mind blown by the late 90s stuff that was happening, especially in the underground, as well as for the first time really appreciating some of this extremely mainstream stuff like Rockefeller, like Jay-Z, and like really starting to just open my mind up to the fact that even though it was all different, it could all be in the conversation. But I always kind of felt like, I don't know how I contribute to this. I'm definitely not a rapper. I suck at dancing. I'm not going to be a good b-boy. I'm terrified of getting arrested for graffiti and, like all the elements. And so production was like, oh yeah, I am musical, and I can have this role in the background, and it allows me to, again, break out of my shell and work with a lot of people and collaborate. And so him and my mom and me went to a guitar center he picked out the MPC. She floated me for a summer so I could buy it. Because this is back when, I think it was $1,200, and that was kind of like entry level. There was no GarageBand or, you don't just get an iPad and download a $5 app or whatever. Which again, what an incredible change to have witnessed. Like the access. Just the door, blown wide open. Like if you have access to the internet, you can be just as good as anybody else.
And the education that's out there is
incredible.
I'm so jealous about
I know,
that,
right? So anyways, I did pay I paid the loan back over working at the movie theater that summer, but that was the start. And I started, POS took me, we went to Cheapo Records. We spent like an hour in the dollar bins. He showed me probably an afternoon's worth of like, here's how you put the needle on the record and you sample it, and then you assign it to this pad, and then you can chop it up. And this again is back when I had like 12 seconds of sampling time total in the box. So if you're going to make a whole song, you can only have 12 seconds so a kick drum is going to be a second, a snare drum is going to be a second, a hi-hat. But then there's ways to like chop it fine or record it in at a high speed and then slow it down and add some time. So all those things have also changed, right? Like I have infinite sample time now on any song I make, and I take full advantage of it. But also there was something incredibly challenging about like,
there's creativity and limitations.
For sure. Anyways, so I'm living on my own. I'm now in my early 20s. I'm my mid 20s, and the rap thing, Doomtree, has formed. We're just a bunch of kids who are like learning how to make music together. I'm probably mostly influenced by those people in the crew because I started making beats at the same time as everybody else in that crew, and we just kind of fumbled through it together, and we're inspired by each other. Like if someone stumbled upon a cool thing. So just being so locked in with friends and like-minded folks that are at the same level and like falling forward together and, figuring it out together. I just am such a huge proponent to this day of like crewing up, whatever that means. Like we were still all solo artists, but we had kind of created this support group for each other. And it's been so beautiful to go through the good and the bad and the hard and the triumphant with other people who are at the same level as you. I always try to tell like students, if I end up popping in for a guest speaking thing, that like you don't have to. Back in the day, it used to be like, well, I gotta save up like $5,000 and buy a verse from some like New York rapper who's established or something like that. It's like, no, just find somebody that's at the exact same level as you and build it together and save your money and just like take some of the pressure off. And my life is collaboration. And I'm so grateful for music for that, because I don't think it would have come naturally to me without that as like a backbone. Is like, okay, we're trying to create something here and we each bring something to the table. And so much of my life has been informed through collaboration and really enriched through collaboration. So it's
such an awesome way to learn and to share creative skills, to network.
Yeah.
The opportunities are twice as many.
Totally.
I encourage it all the time. It is absolutely a game changer for people. It's just to keep collaborating.
Totally. And it doesn't mean to never do things for yourself. Like I've very much taken this year for myself and making like 12-minute long, droney, ambient-esque beats. But in my mind, I'm like, well, I earned that. Last year I put out like 4 albums with other people. So yeah, you ebb and flow. But
there are times where it feels like you need to just hold something close to your chest and go into solitude and make something.
Yes.
Totally. But that's becoming a little bit of the default, I think, for a lot of people. And I don't think that's the right trend. I do think that collaboration should stay strong.
I think so too. And I think there's ways you can do it remotely now. I do it that's probably the most that I'm doing it. So there is still a bit of a loneliness factor almost when you're just sending files back and forth through email. But yeah, I just some of the most like magical moments in my life have been because of I couldn't have done what somebody else did. And so when we put it together, like neither of us could have created that on our own. And that is pure magic to me. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I kind of live for those moments. So anyways, now, okay, I'm rambling again.
We got
bring me back.
Got into the beginning with Plastic Constellations.
Yep.
You get back into the hip hop and rap scene. Doomtree forms just out of friends needing to help each other and share resources.
Yep.
Well, at what point now do you feel like this is a career? What happens?
Well, so that was always the hope and the goal, but I delivered pizzas and managed the takeout counter at the Green Mill in Uptown for almost 10 years. So what happened is I found a job that was flexible enough where I could get my shifts covered when I had a 2 or 3 week tour. And that same job would save my ass every time when I'd come home from tour broke and I had a week to pay rent. And I would just pick up a bunch of shifts and I could just scrape by. So about a decade of, in earnest, really with that being the goal, I think I quit my job a couple of times, made it for a month or two and realized like, oh God, I can't do this. I have to have some sort of income, even if it's just like tips from slanging pizzas. But I did, when the Plastic Constellations came to an end, I remember having this kind of like fork in the road moment. And, I hadn't gone to school. I hadn't gone to college. Do I commit to music and double down? Do I try to figure out what the hell else a life without music at the forefront looks like? And I decided to double down and like really throw myself into production and then, support myself by however I could, which was at that time just working a regular old delivery job. And then probably in my late 20s, like 28, 29 is when I finally took the big leap where I'd had some things, at this point now, POS and Doomtree have both gotten more on a national level. There's starting to be more interest. I think we'd gotten a distributor. I was really stepping into the kind of running the label at that point because as we grew, it was always like we all had all these different tasks, right? Like we were pretty organized actually for our crew. We had like a weekly Wednesday night meeting and I had I still have like probably 20 notebooks in my basement of where I would handwrite the action items every time. Like, okay, Papes is going to be on finding a printer for this t-shirt design and Kai is going to design it. And well, we got to have that, action items, to-do lists, checklists. I kind of grew into this type A character through being kind of like the band captain or whatever. And now it's become like quite a bit of work and a lot of emailing and a lot of phone calls. And because now there's booking agents involved and we've got a distributor and there's more people that you need to talk to. There's more inquiries coming in. There's more scheduling. And in that year, I was able to turn that into more of a full-time job. We didn't have any money to compensate me necessarily, but it was starting to pull a little bit more money for all the work I was doing with that. And there's an A&R person at Interscope who was interested in the work I was doing and asked, this was at the time when like all the blog rappers got signed to major labels. So like J. Cole and Drake and God, a million others. I'm trying to think of like who some of those other people were, and 50 Cent was huge. And so Interscope and Universal had kind of like this new stable of young artists. And he was like, I really like your work with POS. I think your stuff is mainstream enough that it could work with us here. When he hit me up about that, like to start sending him beats, I was like, okay, fuck it. I have to like do this nonstop for a year. Like this is all I've ever wanted. Maybe I could like get a placement on a huge record or something like that. I got super close in the first 2 weeks to landing a beat on, I think, the third 50 Cent album.
Wow.
And I was like, this is it. My life is changing forever. Like, it's done. I'm going to be so rich and I'm going to start working with huge artists and blah, blah, blah. And kind of fell through in the 11th hour, like most things do. And then I spent a year, like literally every day, I made a new beat every day, 5 days a week. I treated it like a 9 to 5. And sent it to this guy who's a dear friend now, Dave. And just nothing ever, I think I landed like one Wale Gucci Mane remix that actually got shelved and never came out. So a lot of like just trial by fire. But I'm so grateful for that year because in that time, I also, all those beats that I made, they didn't end up getting used. But at the end of that year, I had, 200 some beats in this vault. And a lot of those tracks turned into Bad Time Zoo that Sims put out, or the No Kings album, or different POS albums, Dessa albums. Like I kind of was armed now with this vault as I continued to make new stuff. I had this stuff that I could also show people.
Yeah.
And I also made my first solo album that year, which another one for me. Like I sang, I played guitar, I produced it. It was kind of like a hybrid of my pop and hip hop production and my indie rock background, and it was a total brick. Nobody heard it or bought it, but it was so, I think in those late 20s, and it was before I had become a father, but I was just kind of in that like, oh man, this kind of first chapter of my life is coming to an end. And I had all these things I wanted to say. And I got to do that. That year was like so pivotal. So at the end of that year, even though I was scraping by, I could see that things were getting better. Like the crew was getting bigger. The schedule was clear, so I could actually go on more of the tours, and we're starting to see more people come out to the shows. And so it's just been this, like, you talk about trajectory, and sometimes I can't even tell if it's going up. Like, it feels flat always. and there's just a little bit of an incline, and it's kind of been my whole life. And I can't say necessarily right now it's on the incline, but for a really, for like 20 years, just slow and steady, painfully slow with, 2 steps forward, 1 step back type thing. But I'm so glad in hindsight for that, like that time that it wasn't overnight, because I've seen that happen to a lot of people, and I've seen how difficult that can be, and also how hard you can crash in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
When you experience things like that. So old man me is like, okay, maybe it was all for, by design that I was eased into this, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle the pressures of some overnight stuff anyways.
Sure.
Also makes me sleep better at night being like, oh yeah, that's how I wanted it to go, But yeah.
So, okay, I want to circle back to a couple little things.
Yeah.
Because all of that makes sense so far, but at the same time, you still had some, pretty significant things that even got you to those opportunities.
Yeah.
So for instance, like Plastic Constellations, you got a Pitchfork write-up.
Yeah.
You get to this point where you're working with an A&R from Universal. Presumably that was in part because Doomtree was starting to get recognition, right? And
exactly.
You guys were starting to get national attention. How did that happen? Who was getting you this sort of press or this recognition?
Yeah,
was
totally.
it completely on its own, organic, or was there somebody working on that stuff?
There wasn't, in the beginning at least. As Doomtree grew, we started to have budgets for hiring a publicist and things like that, which used to be, there used to be more concrete. Like you hire a publicist and there's all these blogs. There was a blog era where it was like, they're going to actually, there's a lot of things they can get you because everyone's got their own blog and blah, blah, blah. That time has kind of passed now, and it's harder to justify the cost of a publicist on an indie level, I think.
Music journalism in general has changed.
It's tough.
Yeah. It used to be a lot more important.
I think so. I think it's important and robust. And yeah, there was just a place for it. And we could do a whole podcast on that. Yeah. But at the time that we got the Pitchfork review, I didn't even know what Pitchfork was. We did nothing. I do think that there was, if I'm being super real and honest about it, the person who started Pitchfork was a couple years older than us, but came out of Hopkins High School. So the high school that I'm from. I didn't know that either at the time. And so there's a very good chance that there was some connection that like, oh yeah, well, a guy I went to school, his little brother plays bass in that band. We should review it. But they gave it Best New Music, and it was, it was released by a local label here called 2024 Records at the time. So I don't know. And I don't even think it's very possible they had sent it out to them, but I was young enough where I had no clue. I was just happy to like,
yeah.
But I remember we were on the road. We had just played in Denver, and I think I got a text from someone like, yo, you got to check this out. And we hadn't had many things reviewed, period. And it was like, oh, this is really sweet. And it came out on a Friday, so it was up there the whole weekend. And that was the first time that I noticed we still had 2 weeks on this self-booked tour, but more people are starting to come to the shows as the tour goes on, like after that review comes out. So that was kind of the first time I saw like some sort of a internet impact.
Yeah.
Because that band is from the time we never made a music video. We only ever had a MySpace account. That was the most we had ever gotten, Before that, which a lot of the history of that band was even before MySpace, it was like you either play in front of someone's face to show them that you exist, or you might, be able to mail a demo tape to like a zine in Columbus, Ohio or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe, someone will read about in the back of their weekly or whatever. But there wasn't an internet presence unless you got reviewed. It was just kind of like, just shove it down people's throat. If you can get on the road, like play whatever you can. And so also being old enough to see like that, and to have that go now to this, like you can become an overnight TikTok sensation by just like uploading something at 3 a.m. Like, yes, it only happens to 0.005% of the people, but what a crazy change. So yeah, anyways, I don't know. I think a lot of those things happen just, over years and years of different things. Again, this is that like networking and collaboration and all that kind of stuff, right? It certainly helped that POS was signed to Rhymesayers as a solo artist. And so he was opening up for some of their bigger acts, getting in front of more people, kind of spreading the word of Doomtree in the early days, which opened the door for us. And also not only just like a new fan base, but also industry-wise, like he then got a booking agent, and then he was able to tell his booking agent, like, well, you should check out my crew. And then we were able to kind of tag along on that one and things like that. You just kind of like...
That's how it works.
Yeah.
It's by having a large enough friend network that you can share resources and share these connections. That's always the story over and over and over again. There's rarely somebody that's out there just doing it on their own.
1,000%. And, and you hear about all the... I mean, the cynical side of like Nepo babies and all the stuff. Yeah. Like, well, they had to have known someone. Like a lot of times that is actually true. But a lot of times it's true, but not to negate like years of hard work. And then something like that just ends up happening. The unfortunate truth is that there is no like path through just steady hard work of guaranteeing anything.
No,
that's a difficult thing about the arts, you know?
That's always been hard. And I think it's probably even harder now just because of the amount of stuff that comes out all the time.
It's damn near impossible to be heard. And I don't have any answers anymore. I used to, at our probably youngest and most creative and just like not giving a fuck as Twitter and things like Instagram are happening. And so we were able to like kind of do this DIY, you know, self-promotion and marketing, but also connecting to all these people, like the really cool, positive things of social media. Like your world opens up. Now you can talk to people all over the world. You can learn about other cultures. You can just get a greater sense of what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's mostly a dumpster fire, but you know what I mean? The idealistic parts of it. And we got to really grow our fan base through that, through being like super approachable and responding to people and showing what like really goes on a van tour, you know, like we were always very much, I think, trying to pull the curtain back and just show like what it really looked like, for better or for worse, and you know, point out some of the like absurdness and the hilarities of that too, right? Like here's fucking 8 people. One of us checked into a La Quinta in New Mexico and opened the side door and 7 fuckers rolled in with sleeping bags, you know, like kind of embracing the non-glamorous sides, especially in rap and especially in the early 2000s when it was still a lot of at least public perception was like, oh, it's all uneducated people would say it's all guns or drugs or money, to just really show that it's everything. There's that, there's this, there's 7 people on the floor in the La Quinta. There's a lot in between those, you know, like just kind of offering that it's a wider genre, I think, that it gets pigeonholed as.
Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my latest offering for independent artists here at Helvig Productions. As you may know, I'm a music producer located here in the Twin Cities, and I've been running a recording studio for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of local artists spanning pop, rock, Americana, and all the various forms of indie singer-songwriter music. And I know just how hard it can be to finish your own songs. It's easy to get stuck in a death loop of endlessly tweaking things, rewriting sections, or just completely starting over and never feeling satisfied. This is why I've started offering a free song analysis, which I call Musician's Roadblock Relief. If you're currently stuck working on that same song over and over again, I'd love to offer you some ideas that may help. I will objectively analyze your track and offer some helpful possibilities to hopefully get you unstuck and back to finishing that project. My feedback will cover one of the 3 areas where I've seen artists struggle the most. The first one is the song itself. I've had artists come to me wanting to produce a song that just isn't great. But there's no sense in spending money on a bad song because no amount of production or mixing will fix that. You need strong melodies, good lyrics, and a nice flow from start to finish. The second roadblock I see artists run into is bad production. Even if the song is good, the production needs to match the sound you want. Are the sounds right for your style? Is the arrangement too messy? How does it build? Are you doing too much or too little? When all the supporting production elements work in harmony, the song comes to life. And the last thing is mixing problems. Nothing is more frustrating than loving your song, but discovering it sounds terrible everywhere outside of your home studio. Pro-level mixing is hard, and it takes years to master. Mixing problems may be holding you back. If you've wasted enough time in the trial and error loop and are ready to try a different approach, head to helvigproductions.com/fixmysong and fill out my application. That's HELVIG productions.com/fixmysong. I'll take a look at your specific situation, and if I think I can help, I certainly will. It's 100% free and may just be the thing to get you unstuck and back making progress toward your goals. At what point did you feel like this is working? You know, because you said before, like, I kind of quit my job, I was back on.
Yeah.
Was there like a moment where like, hey, now I think I can make a living off of this? Was that because there was a certain project that happened that became successful? Doomtree got to a certain, like, what was that moment like?
I remember probably the most I've ever felt like an immediate it's working, and it's not tied to money, but it's tied to just like people knowing about it, was Doomtree put out No Kings, which was our second crew album, and it was our first crew album that we actually like all holed up and wrote together. It wasn't kind of like a compilation where everyone had a song here and there. It was like a full band album. We loved it. We made it really fast. We had just gotten a distributor, and they were like, you have to, if you're going to sign with us, you have to have some album that comes out in the fourth quarter this year. And we were like, shit, we don't have anything. And so I remember putting together, we picked the release date. I mean, they'll tell you this is stupid as fuck, but I was like, guys, whatever, it's March. The album's coming out in November on this fucking date. And we have to make it and finish it and deliver it and get it pressed and all that. And I just put together this like insane timeline, and it was hell, but we did it. You know, we holed up in a cabin for a week and we basically made most of it. And me and Cecil had been working on beats all summer, and we had this stockpile of collaborative beats, which we had never really tried to do before. And anyways, day it comes out, we do a No Kings Day around the city where it was like we were just all piled in the van, and we popped up. You looked at the map and it was like, okay, they're going to be outside this coffee shop at 10. They're going to be at this corner at 11. And we were just there hanging, selling records, signing stuff, like just kicking it with the people. And then I think it ended with like a secret show, and we were all over the place. But during that time, seeing all these people, like there's just this buzz in the city that I've always wanted. Like I've always wanted to be like, if even just for a moment, the top dog just in our hometown. It doesn't have to be everywhere, but like just to know that you're like, you've got the juice is such a like incredible feeling. And that record dropping, getting it locally, and then like in between, you know, I'm checking emails and I'm refreshing Twitter to see what people are saying. And it's the first time, maybe the last time, that I can't scroll fast. Like I typed in Doomtree and it's just everyone's talking about it. And at that time, before I knew what viral anything was, it was just like, oh my God, people are excited and they're paying attention. And then those were some of our first sold out shows on the road. The following tour, like it was like, oh, wow. And then that led to our first international touring over in Europe and the UK, dates in Canada. And that's when I've really felt like, oh, this is it. Like, this is everything that I've wanted. This is what I've watched my favorite bands do. Or I've seen other people take this next step. And it was such a like incredible, I'm sure I cried. I was just so overwhelmed. Granted, it didn't necessarily mean a ton of money. I was still at that point. I went on the tour. My wife at the time was just gotten pregnant. The dates were already booked. So I was on the road, which I, you know, looking back, I do regret. But at the time, it was the most money I could make, was touring for those months. I was going to make way more doing that than I would have delivering pizzas. And I didn't want to go back to delivering pizzas. And at that time, I'm like, first kid, I'm like, well, you know, I'll be home before the kid comes. We ended up having a lot of complications, and it would have been much better if I had been at home. Years of counseling has taught us that for sure. But, you know, at the time, it was like, well, the dates are booked and I got to go do this thing before And
it feels so fragile.
It does. And it's like, oh, God, I'm going to have a kid. My life is going to change drastically. I got to do this thing. So, but yeah, that felt like, wow, I can't believe it's happening. And then also there's a part of me that's like, wow, I can't believe it's finally happening after I'm about to now have my first kid and everything's going to change in my life. I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do.
What year was that?
I think, well, Penny was born when I was 30. So 11, I think the record came out. Yeah. 2012. So there's that. That was a big one. Lizzo was another big one.
Of course.
You know, and I'm always just kind of stringing things. My whole life's motto has been little money, lots of places. And the idea that like having lots of lines out is really important. And I always use this stupid fucking fishing metaphor. And I've never caught a fish in my life, but like, you know, you just have all your lines out and one of them's got to be biting at some point. And like, it's not all at once, but you reach a tipping point if you're hustling hard enough. And so for me, that's looked like, as someone who hasn't had to necessarily like get a real full-time straight job yet since 12 years ago, but who has dabbled in literally everything. Like I'll get a little bit of money teaching. I'll get a little bit of money performing. I'll get a little bit of money from a teensy bit of money from digital streaming royalties, or every so many years a song gets placed in a TV show or something like that. And there's all these things. And somehow I've been able to just like keep it afloat. But this year, more than any year in these last 12 years, has been by far the like most crushing, hard, difficult year. And I'm like, fuck, you know, I don't know. I might have to like, I really am seriously looking into like, do I just need to get either a part-time job or something that's easy, or I don't have to like go to trade school or something. But anyways, all to say, like it never, for me, it has never felt comfortable.
Yep.
But it has felt very exciting. And I don't know if I would trade that for more stability, you know? And I have been able to find a way to make it work with 3 kids. Like, you can do it. I did have to stop touring. I became a weekend warrior, and I had to figure out how I was going to replace that income. And I kind of leaned more into the behind the scenes roles of, you know, well, if I'm here, I can lean more into managing the group or managing other artists. I can really fully run the label and do the things that the less sexy stuff. Like, I would much rather most of the time be on stage in New York City, but I'm on a conference call with, you know, 1 million people, and that's okay. So I've done it in the only way I was able to do it and still make room for these other things like a family. And so you can do it all sorts of different ways. There's no one right way is kind of what I'm here to say, I guess.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, the part about always having as many opportunities, as many lines out there as possible.
Oh boy.
It's real. It's real. And you do always have to keep thinking, what's next? Yeah. What's the next thing I can do? Because if you're around long enough, you'll see people just light on fire and you think, wow, they're going to be huge. And then it's just gone.
Yeah, totally.
It's just gone. It's so hard for stuff to really, really last.
Totally.
You can have these amazing moments.
Yeah.
And they're great and ride that. But it is hard to sustain forever for one reason or another.
Totally.
And so you always have to be ready to pivot and to have multiple skills, lots of a large network. I mean, that's just a part of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's been many moments where I've been like, oh, that's a great opportunity. Like I did an official Doja Cat remix a few years ago and it was amazing. I didn't make tons of money, but I made a little bit of money. And I was like, oh my God, my name is on a Doja Cat. She was really blowing up. Like, oh, maybe this is going to be the thing. Like, so many times I'm like, oh, maybe this is going to be the thing. Or, you know, I produced the entire first Lizzo album. Maybe this will be the thing that like fully secures my slot for life as some like in the game, always having work. And it's just never, you know, it's nice. You got to remember to like really soak in those moments because I now know at 42, like they come and they go and you can't bank on anything and you just enjoy what comes. And if nothing comes, you enjoy the process of being creative and making music. Like COVID, if nothing, you know, one of the biggest silver linings for me was everyone's got their sob stories. So I'm not trying to woe is me it, but you know, at that point I was considering starting like a management firm. I was managing probably close to 10 artists. Label was running and I was really like, okay, this is the next phase for me, like to be more of an elder role behind the scenes business wise. And I think we canceled of all the artists I was working with representing, we canceled like 150 shows that first week that COVID hit. So a lot of the acts were actually on the road. Like I remember Polisa was out pacing the virus in Europe. We only had to cancel Italy, but then there was a week off while they came back to the States and had this like 2-month North American tour. And by that time, the virus got over here and squashed that. And, you know, and Heartbones was in New Orleans. We had to figure out how to get him home. Like all to say, between my own live shows that I was baking on and the percentage that I would get as a manager of all these other artists, like 80% of my money was just gone. And it's the same story for so many people. But when faced with like a pandemic and no money coming in, like I still had this deep desire to create music, regardless of if anyone heard it. For the first time in a while, it wasn't tied to any immediate source of income or, you know, like set up for anything. It was just like, now I'm here for the first time in years with actual free time to make something. Because the downside of really going hard on the biz side was probably 95% of my day was more like emails and phone calls. And it was very hard to carve out time to just make music. Now I have unlimited time to make music and it was so freeing and I've never been so broke. And also when I look back, I mean, it was a very hard time. It wasn't like I was crushing it in COVID, having like the greatest time, but like sitting on my bed with headphones and my little MPC and my laptop and just making 3 beats a day was like, it was almost like a renewal of the vows to music for me. It was kind of where I realized like, oh yeah, I am a lifer. Like I've maybe become a little cynical as I've turned this into my real job, and the music industry's hard and there's all these things that aren't fair but that was like almost a come to Jesus moment of just like, no, I need this. Like I need this. I need making music like I need exercise or fresh air or, 8 hours of sleep, Lord willing, or, time to relax. It's the same thing. It's like this, it's the same, almost the same type of like meditation practice for me now. And I'm a crabby asshole when I go more than a couple weeks without making something. And I have to remind myself, sometimes I have to make something just to like balance my chemicals out. Because I just get crabby when I don't have that outlet. And so again, I just think it's good. So easy to, especially the longer you're in this game, regardless of at what level or for what reasons, it's really easy to turn cynical and cold and feel like everything's rigged. And, and there's a million examples of why it is. It's really important, I think, to also like hold on dearly to like the thing that you got into it in the first place for. And for me, that was this like high that I got, whether it was sitting down with a guitar or the MPC, that I would sit down and there would be nothing. And however long it took, I would get up and there would be something. And it was new. It wasn't necessarily good, but I made it and it's there now. And that like hour-long high after creating something out of nothing is what I'm continually living for. And it's never gotten old. There's really not much I can think of that comes close to that euphoria in my life.
Agreed.
And then there's the come down the next morning when you listen to it again and you're like, oh, wow, it's just all right. Or, that's actually total garbage. But then that makes you want to do it all over again. So it's like that's the like never ending carrot in front of me, I think. And that's been really a driving force for me when I've felt at my lowest or like nothing's working or like it's not connecting. I'm 42. I'm at a place where I am, as far as like public perception maybe or interest in my output, I have plateaued and if I'm being realistic, probably I'm on the decline as far as interest or the opportunities or just kind of like really being in the mix. And that has been a challenge to work through, and it depends on the day you catch me. Like I'll be like in my feels pretty hard about that. Like, oh, are the best days over? The best days are only over if you put it under the lens of what success is. If it's just numbers, if it's just like the size of the people in the room or, the number of the streams on your Spotify, then it's really easy to go down that like sulky road of like, oh, this is hard. It's not connecting anymore. Or like social media is too tough, or I don't know how anyone gets heard over the million songs that are released every day. And when I focus on that, I turn into a really sad person. It doesn't mean that it's all false. Like there's certain truth in there, but if I can take the focus, if I can acknowledge that and focus on, but I am still in love with making music. I'm in love with music. I love listening to music still. Like, and I hold on to that and I think about like how making music makes me a better person and a better listener and more at ease and more in my body. And that there are still people that are interested in what I'm doing. And sometimes that's like my kids who are now, God bless them, old enough to like occasionally humor me and be like, oh, Dad, you made a new track. Okay, let's hear it. It helps if I name it something that they like. So I named the last beat Slay All Day. And they were like, oh yeah, I'll listen to Slay All Day. I was like, okay, it's 12 minutes of just like drones. But they listen to it. When I can lean into that stuff, I'm in a much better place. For myself and for others. I'm trying as hard as I can to lean in this direction.
I want to ask you a little bit about the collaboration process because you've done so many collaborations. I imagine that every artist and every process can be different, but maybe if you have a typical one or like giving a little bit of an overview of like when you go, a project comes up, maybe you get asked to do it or you propose it or whatever it is, like talk about how some of these different collaborations work.
Totally. I mean, for me as a producer, collaboration, it was different in a band. In a rock band, it was kind of a typical like, okay, there's going to be certain people that write the songs and then we're going to teach these parts or we're going to all learn it together. We're going to jam. But as a producer who kind of has generally played the role of, I'm going to create the music underneath whatever vocals there are. And then the vocalist, whether it's a rapper or singer, is going to come in and that's going to be their 50%. It started out with just like having a stockpile of beats. And my approach was always just have a shit ton of beats because you never know what someone's going to like. And I still can never guess what someone's going to pick. So in the past, it was like, well, I'll just make whatever I want, knowing that I'm going to have this vault of like 300 tracks and people can just sift through it. that's really overwhelming for an artist and also not very focused. So as I grew in the producer role, I realized like it's better if I'm more intentionally making music for a specific person or thing. Like it goes a long ways, especially when you're doing like a collaborative album or EP with another artist and you're creating a body of work and not just one song. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of like, I love asking an artist, regardless of if I've worked with them before or not, like it starts with like, what are you into right now? Like what gets you excited? And it doesn't have to be music. It could be a comic book or, this stand at the state fair or whatever. Yeah. But like, let's just like get a rapport, find some common ground as humans and get excited about something. And it's really fun to like get excited about something with somebody else that you've just found out likes this one random thing that you're into. And then that usually just like starts to inform what we want to try to create. And it doesn't always have to be like, I want to do a song just like this Big Sean song or whatever. But it's like, okay, well, that's cool. You're into this type of thing. And I'm able to kind of find some through lines. And in all of this kind of research, I'm kind of making the lane a little bit smaller for myself. Like we talked about in the beginning, like limitations can be really helpful. I need that because otherwise it's too big.
Oh, absolutely.
You can do anything now.
I always ask people for like, throw me some references. And it's not that you're going to make it exactly like that thing, because even if you tried, it usually doesn't turn out that way because it's still coming through your own voice.
Yeah.
You do a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're going to filter that through you, and it turns out into something cool. So I think that can be helpful. And musical references are good, but it can be anything.
It can be anything.
That might spark another idea.
Totally. And so that's kind of like the conversation. Oftentimes it's an artist who doesn't live anywhere near me. So it'll be a Zoom, but it's still the same thing that we're getting after. And I like to have that call. Sometimes I'll just be like, all right, I'm just going to listen to your stuff and put together a little pack of beats and send you 10 things and you let me know if anything grabs you. But oftentimes now I'm going to now sit down and create some original stuff with you in mind. And then a constant chiseling and tweaking along the way, right? Like that first pack that I might send over to someone of 10 ideas, they might be like, actually, no, I was thinking more like this. And then those are all out the window and we go somewhere else. Or like, that one's really close, but it's a little fast. Or maybe some more heavier, darker instrumentation. And so it is just this, true collaboration from every aspect. And then depends on the artist. Sometimes they're very much like, I've got the vocal melody and the lyrics. Don't talk to me about that stuff. That's what I do. It's totally cool. I'll just handle the music. Sometimes there is a real back and forth in the studio, especially when you're in person. Like, I think about it. I've been working with Dessa from Doomtree for 20 years. And from what started in the very beginning when neither of us totally knew what we were doing and me just being like, well, that's the beat. I can't actually even make the changes you want. So we'll have to just keep it how it is. Or, like to now where it's like this total conversation at all times. And I'm in the room with her and our co-writer, Andy, and we're going back on, she'll show us the lyrics and we're like, oh, that line's a little busy. Let's take that line. Let's take that word out. Or what would be a better rhyme here? Or what would be a better cadence? And then she's tracking the vocals at the same time, and I'm weighing in on takes, or if there's too much oomph in it, or there's not enough oomph, or that's a little flat, or we should add a harmony, or everyone has a voice in that. Mm-hmm. That is so fun. I remember when I was young, there was the big debate over like beat maker versus producer.
Yes,
and a lot of high and mighty people would be like, well, if you're just making the beats, that's just like whatever, And I was the young kid who felt like pride in being a beat maker. And also didn't totally understand the difference. I was like, why can't this all just be the same thing? But I did learn over the years that a producer, the way they were at least trying to explain it,
traditionally,
does have more input than just like, here, I made this song. It really is like, you're in it and you're in it till the end and you're weighing in and you're listening. You're not just like barking orders, but you're listening, you're offering your input and you're asking for things to change and let's try it this way, or, let's get creative. It's like a true creative collaboration is like that. And I love that. And if you let me, I love getting involved in the like, well, I think that's the press pick actually, or like, oh, that's the album cover. What are we going to name the thing? Like, I love all that. Because then you're at the funnest part, which is like a lot of the hard work of making the music is done. I'm doing this with shredders right now, where like the new music we've been working on is basically, it's in the final mix stage. And now it's like, I sent a text this morning, like, what are we going to call these songs, guys? We don't have names for the songs. Like, what are we going to call the EPs? And that is the best because you're still in creative mode. It's before you just have to actually go out and like present it, but you're so close to wrapping it up and you still like it. It's the best. I wish albums could come out, and they do sometimes, but like a day after that happens, and you're just like, look what we did, because you're still so excited and geeked about it.
Do you have like a home studio? Are you engineering for artists too?
No.
Okay.
I have probably a mistake, but I never learned gear. Okay. I'm truly like a one-trick pony. I've always used this MPC that is super outdated. My studio comes with me in a backpack. It's this tiny portable version of the MPC that's about that big. Plugs into my laptop, and I have a pair of shitty like Beats by Dre headphones. And I've been in that setup since I had my first kid. So 12 years I've been doing that because it was out of necessity, like, you know, the kid's sleeping or whatever. And I take that thing everywhere I go. So that's my studio. And I'm here also to just tell people, like, I love a fancy studio. We're sitting in an incredible studio right now. And also, if you don't have the means for that, you can also do tons of amazing shit right here with a backpack.
That gets proven over and over and over again all the time. You do not need the best things.
Yeah.
You just need to be creative and put in the time.
Yep. And so I was up last night till midnight, which I rarely work. I'm most creative in the mornings usually when I'm fresh. But last night I didn't have the kids, and I just made 2 weird ass beats till like midnight and was having so much fun in my headphones downstairs. Like, it's the best.
Yeah.
So engineering has always gone to a professional. So once everything's like demoed or dialed, then I bounce out the beat sessions, and we hand that over to usually Joe Mabbitt at the Hideaway, and Andy Thompson, who I work with Dessa, all sorts of different folks. But
yeah. Okay, well then maybe this next question I might kind of know the answer to, but because one of the things that makes collaboration a little bit tricky can be the money side of things, right? Of like, well, who owns what and who's paying for what and stuff. You know, particularly from my own lens, when I've got a studio and stuff, if I have people over here, there's like, well, I'm paying overhead.
Totally.
You know, like, it's hard to just do a collab for nothing. Whereas I think that is more of I would say the everyday music industry is people just getting together, writing music, and then co-owning something. And there is no money exchange up front. It's just, it's about figuring out splits. And if it gets released, or if, you know, and I don't work in that world at all, because you can't pay for a studio.
Yeah, totally.
I kind of assumed that maybe you were in between those things a little bit. So.
Generally, I'm not. Generally, I'm still in you're just going to make some music because you want to make it. And yes, we are going to agree up front that, like, especially if it's an album or something and we're doing the whole thing together, like, it's going to be, if it's me and one other vocalist, it's going to be a 50-50 split, and we're going to own the songs, half of the songs, and mastering and all that. So it really is like, it's very, God, I hate it, but it's rare that there's any budgets on an indie level for anyone to actually pay much, if anything, for beats or for the music.
Yeah,
so a lot of times it really is. Yeah, a lot of times it really is.
Have you ever done work for hire on writing?
I have. I've definitely like dabbled in work for hire for, you know, ad agencies or things like that. Like, hey, we need someone to write this type of song for this hot dog commercial or whatever, you know, stuff like that. I love.
But for the most part, you're making your money on the back end then.
Yeah. Or I'm not making any money.
Right.
You know, like I'd say that's most common for the most part. If you look at, you know, the however many 600 some songs on my Spotify complete or whatever, all the songs I've made, the majority of those would just be like, we just made it because we wanted to. And we hoped that maybe it would make some money later, or we had a release show and we covered our costs or something like that.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of how I've made my actual money is because like I stay in people's minds because I release a lot of music, but then the actual opportunity that pays me is, again, like, oh, because I'm still in the conversation, then an ad agency is like, well, let's bring him in to have him make a song for the hot dog commercial, you know? And then it's like, okay, well, then that will actually pay my rent next month, things like that. So that's been the hard part creatively, is like, I know that I need to do this music and I would love collaborating, and it doesn't ultimately matter if there's no money because I just have to do it. But it's got to somehow then weirdly wrap around to another opportunity somewhere else. And those opportunities, I think, are harder and harder to find these days. So we'll see. Hence me having a tough year and trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, in my mind, it's like, just start doing more of the work for hires.
Yeah.
You know, just
I know,
get paid
right?
up front.
Yeah, totally. I would take any of your Rolodex if you know anybody. I'm in the business of working for hire. I'll just put that out there right now if anyone has any thoughts.
So helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's pivot one more time.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I know that you've got a busy schedule, but I'm kind of curious how you feel like the major changes of the Twin Cities scene specifically over the years.
Yeah.
Like, especially in the hip hop world.
Totally, man.
Where are things at now?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're at this incredible new chapter and it isn't totally written yet. And what an exciting time to be living in, to be watching it kind of transform and progress and change in real time. I've been the young kid watching it who knew the history and was like, remember Dave Perner used to come into the Green Mill and be, oh God, that's Soul Asylum, or what, you know what I mean? Like, and looked up to so many bands and then slowly worked my way into the scene. And then I was like a part of it and not just an onlooker, and then worked my way up it and had my moments of like, we're the biggest band in the city right now and things like that. And then got out of it, then worked with younger people who have that moment as well. And, it's always, when I really think back over the 30 years I've been paying attention to it or involved in it, it's always been changing. The waves come and go. What's hot changes, but it's always been such a multi-genre city. Again, because there's only so many bands or artists, right? You gotta fill a bill on a Tuesday night. Like, well, then the hardcore band's playing with the rap band's playing with the bluegrass band, like we're all on the same bill. And the beauty of that here is that I think people are just conditioned automatically to find that normal. No one blinks when you go to that show on Tuesday night and every act is different. Whereas, you go to like an LA in the past and it's like, no, everything is very much, it's just this, it's just that. So that's been incredible. I think that's still happening. Like, I don't think our city ever has one sound, or has in the 30 years that I've been in it. We definitely had a moment with like Rhymesayers leading into Doomtree where there was this big kind of underground hip hop sound. And it's been cool to watch that sound smashed wide open. I think the stuff that I'm hearing that's even remotely one foot in like what we would consider hip hop rap sounds so uniquely different than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's more and more new people trying it at all times. And it's just getting like totally spun on its head. I love seeing just some kind of traditional like indie rock bands pop up and that thing happening again. I love like R&B is having a moment. So I think we're at a time for the first time in a while where there isn't like your top 4 big dogs that are going to sell out First Ave at any time locally. It's a lot of like jockeying and seeing who might have a hot couple songs and who might actually create a big body of work or hit the road and break out of the city and come back home. Like, it's the first time in a while where you don't have just the like top tier, these are the big acts from here. And I think that's perfect. I think it's time, as someone who is in their 40s and definitely recognizes that it's my time to kind of step back a bit and let a new crop in. And hopefully the whole goal was always to like kick some doors down or open them up wider for the people coming after us, and just really trying to lean into that and just be like, talk less and take up less space when I can. I mean, I'm never gonna stop making music. And I love working with younger people and things like that. But maybe my role is more to help those younger artists, or at least be a resource if they want it, and less of a like having to be in the conversation at all times or work with every single person. Like, it's time for new people to work with new people. That's the best to me. And I just love seeing, well, I don't love seeing live music. I'm going to be really honest with you. I've spent my whole life playing it and seeing it, like, but I love seeing it intentionally when I'm really excited about a new band. Like, me and my girlfriend Jenna went to Eau Claire for 36 hours last weekend. I didn't have the kids for the weekend, and we just were like, let's just get out of here. And we just like went into a record store. I felt like I was a kid again. We went into one of the record stores and I started talking to the clerk and was asking what was going on. And he's like, oh, actually, there's this cool band playing tonight. They're from here. They're just getting started. They're called Backstroke. They're like a punk band. And then that night we went and just like 2 doors down, they were playing in an alley. And we watched like a punk show and saw like a bunch of young college kids get really excited about a new band. And that was awesome. Like, that is the shit that I love seeing.
Yes.
I live for that. Like, just seeing it new, seeing a light in people. And it's just getting started is like such an inspiring thing. So, God, it's so cool. Yeah. So anyways, that's like, I think that's what I'm most excited right now, is just like seeing what's going to happen in the next year, and especially the next 5 years. I really do. It does feel like a changing of the guard in a lot of ways. And
we've had this conversation a lot of like, what is happening over there? Because the industry has just shifted so much, obviously with streaming, the role of social media. As you were saying, like, it doesn't feel like there's these in 2010, you could tell these are the biggest bands right now. That was pretty clear. That's not clear anymore.
Yeah.
You can go and look at who's got the most followers or the most streams on something, which is one measurement.
Yeah.
It's not the only one, but I guess it's probably the best you could do at this point because there isn't really another way of doing it. But because of how fragmented social media has become in terms of everybody's different algorithms, somebody that can be really big in terms of the numbers, still can be unknown to somebody that's in their same city.
Correct. They could still play on a Wednesday night to like 25 people, and they might have 1 million streams on a song.
I'm talking about there's artists here in town that will play the main room and have it sold out, and there's still people that don't know who they are because it's just not showing up on their algorithm.
Totally.
Because it's not necessarily localized as much. You know, what we follow online doesn't have to be local whatsoever. But before that happened, you would follow your local publications, so you were way more aware of what was happening in town.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to know everything that's local. I think there's a benefit to it, and that those are the people that you might actually collaborate with more times than not.
Totally. It's more of a centralized, like we were talking about this before we started, but I remember going record shopping every weekend when I was in high school in Uptown and always picking up Pulse and City Pages and all these weeklies and The Onion and blah, blah, blah. There was a million of Cake was like a zine. And not only would I read about like demo reviews in the back, but I would learn about shows that were happening. I'd learn about bands, same from radio. And there's certainly still that aspect. But when radio is having to take on the entire weight of it, it's really hard. There's just not enough time to talk about that or show everything. So I do think it's been tricky losing some of our weeklies and not having a central like hub for where you go for scene notes or whatever.
On the flip side, I mean, social media does give you even more options in terms of who you're going to follow. Now you might be following some really underground thing that's in a different city that you otherwise would have never heard of. So you can argue it the other way too. And I think that people that spend a lot of time on social media are capable of finding everything that's happening in town. You know, it's not like you can't find it. You absolutely can.
You get out what you put in, for sure.
But it's dangerous.
It's tough.
Because spending a lot of time reading the City Pages publications was a lot healthier than spending a lot of time on social media. I don't think I'm wrong about that.
No, I think that
might be somewhat controversial, but I doubt it.
I don't think so, because there's too many distractions once you get in there. It's designed to take you out of what you came there for.
Yeah.
And so, I know it just...
Well, and it's got it's got so much baggage and strings attached to how it makes you feel. Yeah. You just read like, these are the events going on.
Yeah,
you might be like, I wish that I was in those events. But that was about it. Like, it was less the envy factor. Was not that big of a deal. I never really thought about that.
I don't think so.
You know, that's one thing that I think I do miss about how things were. Although I think where it is now, I mean, if you think about the quality of music you can make and how quickly and education and the ability to connect with anyone and learn from anyone. I mean, I think it's overwhelmingly better in most ways.
Totally.
But there's a few things that I do miss.
And it's also just overwhelming, period. I think all of it is like, it's so maxed out in every possible way that it could be, right? Like endless scrolling and endless music, and the beauty of anyone being able to make music is incredible. And I think that definitely trumps the fact that maybe too much music is being put out for anyone to keep straight. But there's a up and a down for both of them. And I think that's going to be the struggle, is how do we navigate that? How do you take the best from both of those scenarios and still find a way to connect with people? I think there's going to be less full on connecting and growing a massive fan base as there used to be, because everything is so much smaller.
Yeah.
And that's going to force artists, maybe in a good way, to realize that there just isn't this huge thing up here. Maybe you do have to do this as a part-time thing or as a hobby or as a whatever. And it's okay that you also have a day job.
Right. And
you still put out a record every year or whatever, as opposed to this, like, it has to be all or nothing at the top. I'm not sure how that's going to go.
I'm not sure either, but it's hard for me to imagine that we ever get back to any sort of like big star kind of thing. I think it's just going to be a lot of little stuff that's happening. But I can't predict the future. So.
That's right. Be a different podcast if you could. Yeah, no, I mean, it's exciting, and it's when you're just in it as a musician or as an artist, you're in it, the ups and downs are always constant. And so it's the same as going on social media, right? You're like, oh, sick, my friend is having so much fun. And then you're like, oh, I'm not having that much fun though. Or, you know, there's just constant
I know.
comparison. And it's the same with music. I try to talk to other artists all the time about, because no matter who I've talked to at any level, whether it's the biggest dog or just someone getting started, there's this constant, you know, we're always comparing ourselves. So like even a Lizzo is going to be comparing herself to someone bigger than a Lizzo. Like, and when some people are like, they would have looked at Doomtree and thought of us as being so huge. And I'm like, no, we're never satisfied. Like we always want to be bigger. We always want more. You know, that's kind of part of the hunger of it all. In hindsight, I sometimes wish we would have stopped a little bit more to smell the roses and actually be like, this might be as like big as it gets. And that's fucking awesome. Like, this is cool as shit. Let's cherish it instead of always, I mean, part of what drove us was we always wanted more, but there is ultimately an end to that. I don't know. I think just, if we can all continue to talk openly about kind of the hardships of it, or the things, especially with the mental health stuff, especially with like, you know, are you good enough? Do you think that like, are you constantly being like, well, everyone else is killing it and I'm not, you know, the self-esteem thing is getting harder and harder because it's just like, we're all kind of faking it. We're all putting our best side forward. Perception.
Yep.
And even when I post my like cool soft flex, like I also then turn the phone off and go back to probably worrying about some dumb shit or having anxiety about how I'm going to pay the bills this month or whatever. So there's just no real way, unless we all just start crying into our phones to like, to fully show it. And without talking about it, it gets really isolating, I think. And that leads to just shit. So I love conversations like this. I encourage everyone to just like talk about their feelings, because you're not alone in any of it. And it's really hard to do any of this. And it's really hard for anyone to feel like anyone cares. And it's not like you only do it because you want everyone else to care. But part of why we put things out is because we want them to be seen and heard. Like, so just knowing that everybody else is struggling with the state of it all right now is helpful for all of us, I think.
I think so. I think it definitely helps to talk. It helps to find your community and to lean on each other, whether that's simply for conversation or if it's for resources and for collaboration purposes. I think that's another thing that I hope to see more of is people working together of like, hey, you're doing this thing, I'm doing this thing. We have different audiences. Let's do something together to help. I mean, that happens at shows and stuff, but maybe because so much of the world is simply online, and you're going to have a lot of times a larger crowd, a larger audience online than you will at that show, especially as a younger band.
Yeah,
younger artist. Doing those sort of cross collaborations and shared posts can help.
Yeah.
But keeping the dialogue open to just know that where everybody's at and understand that no matter what, it's hard.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's hard.
Totally.
It's just, you got to pick your flavor of hard. Do you want it to be hard because you're going in all in full time and you're scraping by?
Exactly.
Do you want it to be hard because you don't have enough time for it because you got to work another job, but now your bills are paid? Pick your hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's all sorts, and there's no right way, and you can change it at any time too. You're not locked in for life.
And hopefully you have these moments that aren't, that just get easy, that there's some momentum going and things are going great. People are showing up to shows, music's getting streamed, opportunities are coming in. But just know it usually doesn't last, and you're gonna have to pick your next hard. Or even when that happens, then there's hard things with family. If you're married, there's hard things with feeling a sense of home. This business is tough.
Yeah,
and that's okay because it's also amazing.
Yeah,
it's so fantastic,
and everything's always changing. Yeah, I always remember that my friend Mark Malman, who's been a music guy forever. You know, I looked up to him when I was a kid. We go on walks around the lake together and like just bro down. And he told me a few years back, it was really one of these like stop and smell the roses talks, but it was just like, think about how many days out of your life you will have like a release day. You know, even if you're the most prolific person, like whether that's a song coming out or an album or whatever it is, in your entire life, maybe you're lucky enough to have 20 of those. That's just 20 days in an entire life. Like, instead of waking up all stressed out and doom scrolling to see if anyone's talking about it or being sad that it's, you know, you didn't get enough likes or whatever, like instead of immediately going into panic mode, what if you just took yourself out to breakfast and like enjoyed that day and treated it like a birthday because it's such a beautiful thing that you just did and you accomplished, regardless of who hears it.
Yes.
Or how many likes or how many streams you get. And it really did change the way I thought about a big release day. And it's taken a lot of the dread out of it for me. And it's brought a lot of happiness and accomplishment into it. So I just always try to remind people, if you're lucky enough to have finished something, you know, and have worked hard enough to have created something and finished it and actually thrown it out into the ether, take a day and like buy yourself a cookie or something, you know, like be nice to yourself.
I love that. And I'll bring it up again because one of my future planned episodes is going to be something along the lines of like, you know, changing the way we think about that. Like making it matters is worth it no matter if anybody hears it.
Yes.
It can be for absolutely nobody, but going through the process of making it is worth it.
1,000%.
What the dread is partially because it's tied to our expectations, and we're, you know, a lot of us are trying to make a life out of it. We're trying to live off of it and stuff like that. And the whole business of it is really tough. And that is something you can dread.
Totally.
That is hard.
Unavoidable dread for sure.
That is hard.
Yeah.
The music part isn't though.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. And it's tough to separate those things, especially if that's the path that you're on where you're, you know, you're currently working towards that.
But yeah, you got to savor the wins, the little ones. There's plenty of big ones too out there at some point, but the little ones even just like, oh, this came out and it actually showed up on all the platforms, or, you know, like, oh, I got a really nice comment or a really cool DM from someone. And even if it's just that one person that said something nice.
And it can just be the conversation with yourself of, I followed through on this.
Yeah.
I made this out of nothing. I put my time and resources together to make this. Maybe it was self-produced, or maybe you saved money and hit up a studio.
Yep.
Any of those things are big accomplishments, and they're great experiences that will be with you forever.
Totally.
Celebrate that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that dream about it and never do it, or they've made it, they don't have the courage to release it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those things. So just celebrate it. Absolutely.
Think about all the steps that went into getting it to even just being on Spotify. Yeah. It's a lot. So let's build each other up and like actually celebrate the wins and try to, and this is me talking to myself more than anybody right now, like, come on, Pete, celebrate the wins. But last night was a win for me. I stayed up when I really wanted to just turn a movie on and pour a drink. I put my head down and made 2 really weird beats for Cuckoo. And I sent them off at midnight and was like, here's 2 weird ones. They might sound like total shit, but this is what I got into tonight, you know? And like, and I went to bed really happy, and I woke up and I slept in a little bit because I was like, you know what? I put in some work yesterday, and I don't need to do that this morning because I already finished those things. So patting ourselves on the back more. I think we're all going to need it, and patting each other on the back because it is tricky out here.
Well, we're going to keep these dialogues open, and hopefully more of this stuff helps people out there.
Yeah.
And also you can set your expectations of like what this looks like.
Totally.
You know, one question I ask everybody at the end of each episode is if you want to share a secret from the scene that you've learned along the way that you want to share with an aspiring producer, an aspiring musician.
Yeah, totally. Oh God. I mean, it's so basic, but it always comes down to like, don't be a dick. I just like truly, my whole life, you know, there's been times where I could have fought harder or been more of an asshole or really like been meaner. And I've tried really hard not to. And it almost 1,000%, even though you're always going to get burned in this industry. Like when I look back, me trying to be a nice person in a tough industry and give people the benefit of the doubt and be human and collaborate and not like just only focus on the money or the numbers or the, you know, like just turn it into like a really shitty business has helped me so much. And it is truly, I think, why I've gotten a lot of the opportunities I've gotten, because I was a team player and I was rooting for other people and down to help others out. And that favor got returned, or someone looked out for me because they saw me looking out for someone else. Like, I just really think, be cool. Don't like be a pushover, but like be cool. Let some shit roll off your back for the greater purpose, and just put your head down and work has been what's gotten me through all this. And know that not every single thing is the end of the world. This is such a basic ass answer, but like for me, it really has been like I've had moments where I've freaked out about the tiniest things, and 4 hours later, no one would have ever even known that it happened, or, you know, a typo in the blog post or whatever the fuck that I've like lost days of sleep over. And in the end, like, it was all good. So like, I'm getting better at not sweating everything so hard. Nothing has to be perfect. Like, you put everything you can into something, and there's going to be some things you could have done differently and all that stuff. So just getting more comfortable with it being a constant work in progress. My life in music is a work in progress, and I can fuck up and I can redeem myself and I can make cool shit and I can have a real bad slump and I can come back from that. So just like, it's a long game.
I love it.
Long game, strong game is another. Little money, lots of places. Long game, strong game. Those are my mottos.
I love it. Thanks for being here, for sharing all your insight. This has been awesome.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
If people want to follow you, get in touch with you to do some work or something like that, where would you like to send people?
Yes, Instagram is kind of it for me. So at Lazerbeak with a Z. Very hip hop of me in 2000. At Lazerbeak on Instagram is probably a great place. And otherwise, there's an email on the bio as well that you can hit up.
Cool. We will throw that stuff in our show notes. For everybody that listened to today's episode, thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, I hope you liked it. And if you did, please share it with a friend. If you're a returning listener, please take a second to hit subscribe, hit like, leave a rating, that sort of thing. It, first of all, lets me know that there's somebody there. And secondly, it does help keep this thing going. If anybody has ideas for guests, episodes, or wants to continue the conversation, comment on these clips, hit me up, send me an email. I'm all ears. I'd love to hear what people think is working and not working. Mostly, I just want to say thank you for tuning in and giving us some of your time. Until next time.